Hi kids, today we're going to be reading Someday is Now. Clara Luper and the 1958 Oklahoma City Sit-ins. It's written by Olugbemisola, Rhuday, Perkovich, and illustrated by Jade Johnson. Marketplace. In the 1930s, when Clara Luper was a little girl, her father promised that someday he would take her to zoos and parks. When white people were there, and to restaurants where they could sit down and have dinner like any other American. Someday will be real soon, her father will say. Someday will be real soon. Back then, many states denied black people certain rights because of the color of their skin. Even though Clara's father had served his country during World War I, he returned home to heartache and hate. Laws in Oklahoma and other states said that black people and white people had to be segregated. That means that the laws separated black and white people in many public places. But there was nothing fair about separating human beings by race. Separate meant unequal. When her brother got sick, the local hospital refused to care for him. He was turned away because he was black, separate and unequal. Clara Luper's old black classroom had torn books, few supplies, and one person who had to work 3 jobs: teacher, principal, and janitor, separate and unequal. White people could eat in any restaurant or at any lunch counter. Black people weren't allowed to sit at those tables. They had to stay outside. Separate and unequal. Someday seemed very far away, but Clara Luper's family believed in something bigger than the segregated worlds that small minds made. As Clara Luper grew, she kept learning, reading, and preparing for the someday her father had promised. She wanted to help others prepare for it too, so she became a teacher. Clara Luper told her students that education meant participation. She taught them important lessons about speaking out and standing strong. You can't come in and sit there on your constitutional right, she said. You make your changes in the world. Speak, stand. Clara Luper's teaching opened eyes and helped big dreams bloom. A local organization called the NAACP noticed and asked her to lead their youth council. They wanted Clara Luper to help black children learn about their history to build a better future. They wanted her to prepare their children for someday. Clara Luper wrote a play called Brother President about people who spoke out and stood strong for justice. Activists like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the protesters in the Montgomery bus boycott. The Youth Council children held Clara Luper's words in their hearts and shared her stories, power in their performances. The play was such a success that the NAACP invited Clara Luper and her students to take the show on the road. All the way to New York City. In New York, like in most integrated northern cities, Clara Luper and her students did not have to eat outside. They could sit at lunch counters and eat with everyone else. They saw black and white people eating side by side. Everything they ate tasted so good, sprinkled with hope, spiced with justice. Clara Luper showed her students that in some places, someday was now. After they left New York City, Clara Luper took her students to Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. As they stood in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier, they thought about how soldiers like Clara's father had served in their country. All of these people died for our freedom, said one girl. We need to really get busy and do something for our country. The children wanted to participate in the American story. Clara Luper took her students back to Oklahoma through the segregated South. They rode the bus through Tennessee and Arkansas and other states where segregation was the law. They passed the whites-only signs. They ate outside, separate and unequal once again. But now the students knew that it was like to sit down at a lunch counter like white children did every day. They had tasted a little freedom. Clara Luper knew that a little bit of freedom is a dangerous thing. Freedom now, the students chanted. When they got back to Oklahoma City, the students remembered Clara Luper's lessons. They remembered Dr. King and the Montgomery bus boycott. Then Clara Luper taught them about investigation, negotiation, education, and demonstration. With these 4 steps of nonviolence, the students were prepared to make sacrifices for justice. Clara Luper's students approached local white shopkeepers about opening their stores and restaurants to old people all the time. The students hoped that their white friends and neighbors will do the right thing if they spoke to them the right way. Day by day, month after month, for more than a year, Clara Luper helped her students write letters and meet with the shopkeepers. But those business owners wanted to keep whites only. They did not believe in someday. The students had done the best they could with the steps Clara Luper had taught them. They had investigated, they had tried to negotiate and educate. Now these children were ready to demonstrate. Someday was now. Clara Luper told the parents what their children wanted to do. They would go down to Cat's drugstore and drink their cokes in the seats that black people weren't allowed to sit in. She reminded the students to bring their books, because no matter what happened, they will keep learning. Even so, Clara Luper wondered if these children belong in their homes, safely drinking sodas with their parents, not on the front lines, learning the hard lessons of hate. At Cats, one of the littlest girls took Clara Luper's hand, and they stepped forward together. The other children followed close behind. "We'd like 13 Cokes, please," said another brave young girl. The waitress told them to take their drinks and go, like it was just another day. But it wasn't. Not that day. That day, Clara Luper and her students sat down. They sat in. The manager rushed over and told Clara Luper to take her students and get out. He yelled, "You know better than this." He shouted, "You are just a troublemaker." 13 Cokes, please, repeated Clara Luper. Someday was now. White friends and neighbors came to Cats, but they didn't act like friends anymore. Their faces were cold as Alaskan icicles. Mothers spat. Fathers screamed. People threw food at the children and called them hateful names. The police arrived and surrounded Clara Luper and the children like they were the dangerous ones. But Clara Luper and her students just sat and read and studied and asked to be served. When Cats finally closed, Clara Luper and her students went home, but they did not give up. They will be back tomorrow. That night, hate-filled voices hissed and shouted on Clara Luper's telephone. They threatened violence if she didn't stop. "Be careful, Clara," said worried family and friends. "Please be careful." Clara Luper went to bed remembering the ugly words and pushes and shoves of her white neighbors. She wondered if freedom was too dangerous. Will ignorance and hate crush the children's spirits? But Clara Luper had taught powerful lessons to parents and children alike. She taught them to believe, to make the changes they wanted to see. And the next day, her students came back with friends enough to fill almost every seat. Someday was now. Clara Luper and her students kept coming back. They kept sitting and studying and asking to be served, even when people shouted and poured drinks on their heads and threw food and spit ugliness and hate. The children kept on sitting and studying and asking to be served. After years of segregation, months of students' preparation, and days of students' demonstrations, Cats announced that all of its lunch counters in Missouri, in Kansas, in Iowa, and in Oklahoma will serve all people of every race. Clara Luper had taught her students that they could stand and stand strong, even when sitting, and when their special day came, that day when they could sit down in Cats and have their first burgers and Cokes right there, inside. It tasted so good. It tasted like hope and power and liberty and justice for all. They ate and drank and talked and laughed and read and studied and dreamed, and then they prepared for their next segregated store. Someday was now. Marketplace. And that was the end of the book, guys. I hope you enjoyed listening to the story. I'll see you.